MPs and Ministers' offices, including working in the office of the Prime Minister as Director of Policy and Research and Senior Policy Advisor, from 2006 to 2009. He's also worked for Ontario Power Generation, BlackBerry, and as a consultant on energy and environmental issues, most recently heading the energy practice at Hill+Knowlton Strategies. Mark has long been engaged in environmental policy debate in Canada and serves on the advisory board of the Pembina Institute and the steering committee of Sustainable Prosperity. Mark Cameron.
Well, it's great to be here. This is my third time, I think, at this conference, and Citizens Climate Lobby is, I think, one of our favorite organizations, probably the closest organization to us in terms of our beliefs and philosophy. And in the past year, and this is part of what I'm going to talk about, we've come even closer in that our organization has gone from promoting a revenue-neutral carbon tax as the best model to promoting the fee and dividend is the best model, and I want to explain in part why we've come to that conclusion. There's a German expression that there's different variants of it, but that in Berlin the situation is serious but not desperate. In Vienna, the situation is desperate but not serious. And I think we're actually in the Viennese situation right now. On the one hand, things look very grim for carbon pricing in Canada. We've had several changes of government where governments have come out and decided to switch their position on carbon pricing, and we've had provinces reverse course, most notably Ontario, most recently Manitoba. We have New Brunswick in flux. We have other provinces, falling off the carbon pricing bandwagon. So at the end of 2016, we really had every province except Saskatchewan committed to bringing in some form of carbon price. Now we have as many as 5 or 6 provinces that will not have a carbon price in January 2019. So this looks like a pretty desperate situation. But the good news is it doesn't matter because we're about to win. And even more surprisingly, because it wasn't even on the agenda a few years ago, we're about to win with the fee and dividend model. So what I want to talk about is how we got here, just in recent political history, how Clean Prosperity has shifted its position closer to Citizens Climate Lobby's position, and what we're doing right now and what we plan to do over the next year or so, and what I think is going to happen next and what we all should be doing to help. First of all, how we got here. So in 2015, the Liberal government was elected with a very vague promise to bring in a carbon price in Canada without really any specificity attached to that. As you know, in 2016, they negotiated with the provinces and they made an announcement saying that they expected by 2018 for all provinces to have a carbon price in place of some form. They really wanted to leave it up to the provinces and said, you can have a cap and trade system, you can have a carbon tax system, we don't care as long as you meet a minimum price starting at $10 in 2018 and rising gradually to $50 by 2022. You can do what you want, you can do whatever you want with the revenue, you can use it on tax cuts, you can spend it on programs, you can spend it on your deficit, whatever your priority is, you can do it. So it was really very much a leave it to the provinces approach. The provinces all like that, except Saskatchewan that didn't want any carbon tax or any carbon price, but all the other provinces signed on and said, that sounds great to us. We'll bring in our own programs and we'll meet the federal standards. And really, there were people within the federal government, even at the time, who weren't really comfortable with this every province doing their own thing approach, who thought a national carbon tax or carbon price of some form would make more sense. But they were concerned that they had allied provincial governments in Ontario and Quebec who had committed to a cap and trade system with California, and they didn't want to upset their arrangements. And so they compromised and said, we will let the provinces do whatever they want. Well, time went on, and we saw some changes of government. Probably the most important thing that happened was we went from having an Ontario Progressive Conservative Party that was leading in the polls, committed to bringing in a revenue neutral carbon tax under Patrick Brown, Doug Ford, who said it was the worst tax ever. He was going to get rid of it, and of course, when he was elected, he did get rid of Ontario's cap and trade system. Or is in the process of getting rid of it. The Bill 4 is still in the House. I'm actually going to be speaking at the Legislative Committee on Wednesday on Bill 4. But he has promised to get rid of the cap and trade system and replace it with essentially nothing. We have two provinces, Saskatchewan and Ontario, challenging the federal government's right to bring in a carbon price in court. All legal advice is that they really don't have much of a leg to stand on constitutionally, but we'll see how those unfold. And several other provinces, now Manitoba, which had committed to bringing in a carbon price at $25 next year, has reversed course. They're no longer going to bring in a carbon price. New Brunswick has a minority government. Looks like it will probably end up being a progressive conservative government that will not have a carbon price, and even the Liberal government is not clear whether their plans would actually meet the federal benchmark. So we have many provinces now lining up against carbon pricing. Of course, in Alberta, they have a carbon tax in place, but the opposition United Conservative Party is well ahead in the polls, so it's likely that the Alberta government will switch next year, and then we'll have the majority of the country without a carbon price in place. But the federal government, to its credit, didn't leave things entirely in the hands of the provinces. They put in place the backstop. And the backstop essentially means that if a province does not have a carbon price or an adequate carbon price in place by January of this year, the federal government will impose a carbon tax on January 1, 2019, and it will be based on essentially the Alberta model of carbon taxation. So it will be a direct carbon tax on fossil fuels, on gasoline, on home heating, natural gas, and it will be the output-based pricing system for large industrial emitters, which I'm sure most of you know how that works, but essentially large emitters will pay a carbon price for their emissions, but then will be rebated based on the efficiency of their production, based on their carbon intensity. Which essentially means that for sectors like steel and cement and oil and gas that are competitive international sectors, they will end up getting 80 or 90% of their revenues back, but it will depend on their efficiency. So the more efficient they are, the less emissions they have, the more money they'll get back. So there's still a strong incentive for them to improve their emissions performance. So this is going to go in place in all those provinces that are not lined up with some form of carbon price of their own by January 2019. That announcement is going to happen very shortly. My understanding, I don't want to give exact dates, but the Canada Revenue Agency has to know what the taxation rules are going to be for 2019 before 2019 begins. So within the next few weeks, we will have an announcement as to which provinces the backstop will apply in, as of January 1st. And that, I think at a minimum, we know that that's going to apply to Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and maybe New Brunswick, maybe Prince Edward Island. But we'll have probably 5 provinces under the backstop. And that announcement is going to happen within weeks. At the same time, the federal government, the law has said, and one of the major principles that has been agreed by federal and provincial governments in this whole debate is that revenues should remain in the province that they originate from. So that was written right into the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, which is part of the last federal budget, that all revenues have to go to the province that they came from. Now, I think initially what the federal government was thinking was that some provinces would voluntarily accept the federal backstop as their mechanism to do carbon pricing, and that they would voluntarily give the money back to those provinces. But instead, we've had provinces that have said, we don't want a carbon tax, and the federal government's going to have to impose it on them. And in that case, they don't want to be giving hundreds of millions of dollars back to those provinces. They don't want to be giving Scott Moe and Doug Ford hundreds of millions of dollars that they can then go and use to fight the federal carbon tax in court. So they have said that they are going to give the money back to individuals, which they have the right to do under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. And the amazing thing is, I think a lot of people do not believe that this is going to happen. I spoke this weekend to a senior advisor to Andrew Scheer, who said, that'll never happen. There's no way they're going to take that money and put it in general revenue. And I said, well, it's actually in the law. They can't do that. They have to send the money back. And they've been pretty clear they're going to send it to individuals. But there's still a stunning number of people who don't believe that this is going to happen. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. Now I want to just go back a little bit and talk about the development of clean prosperity on this file. We've existed for about 5 years now. I've been with the organization for about 3 years. And our position all along has been in favor of a revenue neutral carbon tax. And really, a revenue neutral carbon tax and fee and dividend system are actually pretty similar. They impose a direct carbon price on emissions, and they refund the money to individuals, households, businesses by tax cut or rebate of some sort. And we've been more or less agnostic on how that's done. And I think there are good economic arguments for the superiority of tax cuts to rebates in that the most distortionary taxes are the biggest drag on the economy. A tax that basically says, there's no incentive to take a promotion. There's no incentive to do that deal and earn another $1 million, because you're going to face a higher tax rate. So there are good economic arguments for why it's better to cut corporate income tax or personal income tax, and that's better for growth in the economy. On the other hand, there's the question of progressivity. Obviously, lower income households spend a greater portion of their income on transportation, on heating their homes and things like that. And it's important to take that into account, which is why we've always supported a mixture of rebates for lower income households, or at least lower middle income households, and then tax cuts as well, which is essentially the model that British Columbia did under Gordon Campbell, the model that Patrick Brown was proposing in the Ontario PC platform. And we thought that kind of a mix was probably the best mix between good economic policy and fairness for all Canadians. The problem with that is really a political problem, that people don't really believe that government will cut their taxes. And they often don't even believe when they've got a tax cut that they've actually got it, because a tax cut, it's all built into your payroll deductions. Most people don't see it. They might, at the end of the year, when they calculate whether they get a refund or something like that, they would say, "Oh, I got a $500 tax cut," but they're not aware of that throughout the year. Whereas a dividend check, particularly for that, I think it's about 25% of Canadians that actually get checks in the mail. But most people will see it, on their bank statement that, oh, I got the Canadian Child Tax Benefit, or I got the GST credit. They'll see that they got some benefit from the government. So it's a much more visible way of returning money to people. And in an environment where the opposition is saying, and some of the provinces are saying, oh, the government will never give you that money back. You can't trust government. Government will never cut taxes. Giving money back as a direct rebate is really a more transparent way of doing it. We spent a lot of time over the past couple of years working with the Climate Leadership Council in the United States. That's Ted Halstead's organization, the group behind the Schultz-Baker plan. And they came out for basically a fee and dividend model. And we spent a lot of time working with them, talking to them. They've got a much bigger budget than us and probably than you. And they've done extensive polling, and they were convinced that the dividend model, the rebate model, was more effective politically. And we eventually came to share that conclusion, that even if there are good economic arguments for putting the priority on tax cuts, there are good political arguments for putting the priority on rebates directly or dividends directly to households. And so we decided this spring that would be our new message. But one thing that we were concerned about was that there wasn't a lot of clarity around the numbers. There were all kinds of speculations as to how much money a carbon tax, the federal carbon tax backstop, would cost households. There is very, very bad data that came out particularly from Saskatchewan, but other organizations were broadcasting very bad data saying it was going to cost families $2,000 a year for a carbon tax. And you've all heard the rhetoric. You're not going to be able to drive your kids to hockey. It's going to be an increase in the tax price on everything. Cost of groceries is going to go up. And there's a grain of truth to that. That yes, a carbon tax does flow through the economy, increase the price of other goods and services, but it was highly exaggerated by the opponents. And we wanted to get some good data into this debate. So we hired Dave Sawyer from Enviroeconomics. He's one of the top environmental economists in the country, has worked with many governments, federal and provincial, across this country in calculating the effects of different carbon tax models or cap and trade models. So a real expert in the field. And we asked him a couple of questions. We said, Dave, what is the cost of a carbon tax, the federal carbon tax backstop, going to be on households? And we want both the direct costs, the cost of gasoline and home heating and things like that, and the indirect cost, how much money is going to be passed through by businesses to consumers, because there's a lot of exaggeration on that, and we want some good data on that. And we also said, once you figure that out, calculate how much revenue is going to come to the federal government from each of those provinces, and then what would happen if you divided up that money equal per capita. And what came back to our surprise was not only would it help lower income households, it would help every household at every income level. People up to $150,000 a year were going to be getting more money back than they paid in. Now, I mean, people find that hard to believe. And actually, you can put the slide on now. This is our figures for the province of Ontario. So this is in 2020, when the carbon tax would be at $30 a ton. If you're a household that is making less than $20,000 a year, you'll probably pay about $222 in carbon prices. So that is, the extra cost you'll pay on transportation, the extra cost, you're probably in an apartment, but there'll be an increase to your heating bill. That's the extra cost you'll face as a lower income household. But every household is going to get back the same amount of money. I mean, it's per capita, so it would be, I think, $195 per person. Average household's about 2.6 people or something like that. So the average household is going to get $517. $195 a person, $517 for a household. So they're going to be $295 ahead. But now even an upper income family, a two-car family that owns a big house, they're going to be paying something like $500 a year in carbon fees, but they're still going to get back the exact same amount of money. So at every income level, people are going to be getting back more, but of course it's highly progressive because the people at the lowest end get back proportionately a greater amount. So this study really impacted the debate in a really positive way. We had a great story from John Ivison in the National Post giving a sneak preview of the study. And once that came out, my phone was ringing off the hook, both from journalists and from angry conservatives. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't clear in that bio, but when I worked on Parliament Hill, I worked for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So I am a conservative, and I think that the reason I support a revenue neutral carbon tax is I think it is the best conservative economic solution. As do the former secretaries of Treasury and chief economic advisors to Presidents Reagan and George W. Bush, but apparently those are not considered to be conservative enough in Canada anymore. So our study came out and showed that there will be a significant impact for households at every income level, thanks to fee and dividend. When we got this data, we decided we're going to go all in on this. We have launched a major social media campaign. We've got a new website in addition to our cleanprosperity.ca website. We have carbon-dividends.ca, which I'd encourage you to check out. And we've got a large social media campaign going, mostly through Facebook. We've already reached over 500,000 people. We've figured out some new innovative models of social media advertising. So when we get someone and they interact with us, often you get negative, angry comments, so that's negative interaction. But if you interact positively, then you get more ads that give you a little bit more information. And then when you're still acting positively, then we say, come and sign our petition. So we've got a very good, we call it the funnel of getting people from just prospects, people who have never seen anything about this before. They get 2 or 3 ads, and if they're still clicking like, then we ask them to come and sign our petition, and we've had very strong response. And we're going to continue doing that and continue ramping that up because we want to have a large constituency of people that believe in this issue in time for the next federal election, so that we can get our message out, and you can get your message out to a large group of people that are sympathetic to this cause. And we're also trying to influence the debate at the public level. Been doing a lot of media interviews and so on, op-eds. Had an op-ed in the Globe and Mail last week with David McLaughlin, another renegade conservative who supports carbon pricing, basically saying that the federal government should take this success with the backstop and make this a national program after the next election. On Wednesday, I'm appearing at the hearings on Bill 4. Mike Schreiner from the Green Party is going to introduce a fee and dividend amendment to Bill 4, which won't win, but hopefully we'll get some good publicity. So continuing to try to influence the debate at that level. So what do I think is going to happen next over the next year? Well, as I say, I think we're going to win. The federal government will announce that they are going to bring in the backstop in 4 or 5 provinces, and that they will be sending money. They may not send 100%, but they'll probably send 80 or 90%, a very high percentage of the money directly back to households as rebates or dividends. There will be court challenges from Saskatchewan and Ontario. I'm pretty sure they're going to lose, and those decisions will come out, at least one of those decisions will come out next spring, which will be a bit of a setback to the opposing provinces when it's clear that the federal government has the authority to do this. Checks are going to start appearing in the mail next spring, at the latest next summer. People are going to be getting hundreds of dollars in the mail and realizing, hey, this carbon tax isn't so bad. Yeah, I'm paying 4.5 cents more a liter, but I just got a $375 check in the mail. So I think that will significantly change the debate in time for the next election. The next election, I'm not partisan, I'm not a liberal, but I'm hoping that the next election sends a message that whatever happens to the government, that we want fee and dividend, and please don't take away our checks. So the great thing is the message has changed from politicians saying, if you bring in a carbon tax, it's going to increase your gas prices. Now they say they're going to give back to you as tax cuts, but you can't trust them. All that's going to happen is it's going to increase your gas prices, increase your heating bill, and you can't trust them not to cut taxes. Well, guess what? 6 months from now, it's going to be reversed. These guys want to take away your checks. They want to take away the $500 you're getting in the mail. They say they're going to lower your gas prices, but gas prices are never going to go down, but they're going to take your checks away. So the entire debate is reversed as of next year. That's my message. I think I'm after a year of setbacks, I'm feeling more optimistic now than I felt in a long time. I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough, and surprisingly, 4 or 5 years ago, everyone would say if Canada brings in a carbon price, it'll either be a carbon tax or cap and trade. Fee and dividend wasn't on the radar, and yet it looks like fee and dividend may end up being the model that is embraced by Canada, and thanks in large part to the organization of Citizens Climate Lobby. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you. I need some help from you, Mark. Stay right there for a second. I need you to help me with something.
Okay.
I want everyone to close their eyes and just concentrate on this for a second. Okay, everybody close their eyes.
Oh, I can't close my eyes. We are about to win.
Right on. Thank you. Yes, savor the moment. This is where you heard it, of course, and we're getting there. We're getting there. So, any questions? We do have questions. Okay, Elaine.